Okay.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, James. Thank you for
Oh,
this.
thank you very much. It's a very, very brightly lit, sunny Saturday morning.
Yeah.
A little on the cold side, but everything just feels good with the sun. I've just done my Tai Chi on the third floor deck, so I'm trying to give myself the right self discipline, which I think is the hardest part anyway. But while you're here, as I as we talked before, I really think that a lot of people would be tremendously interested in knowing what it was like when you actually took lessons from the professor, from Cheng Man-ch'ing, the professor, CMC. And I know his name in Chinese would be challenging for a lot of people, but we all make do. So Professor Zheng, first of all, do you know why he insisted in making people call him the professor instead of, Master Zheng or just Zheng Man-ch'ing, 老师, something like that? Do you know why? Why professor?
I have no knowledge that he insisted on that.
Mm,
So I don't know why people called him that, but they did. Uh,
okay.
and the only reason I can think is that he was thought of himself more as a scholar than as
Oh,
a martial artist. You know, he's a
ah,
painter. He was a spiritual man. He he wasn't teaching martial arts, at least not to us. He,
right. Okay, now let's begin the begin. How did you know of him to begin with? How? And also, why did you want to learn Tai Chi and not karate or boxing?
well, actually did try to learn karate. I went to a class, and they had me doing stretching that was brutal, and I figured I'd just get hurt. And boxing, in those days I would have been scared to learn that. And Aikido, I didn't know anything about that, or judo. I didn't know anything about those things. I'd never heard
So
of
how
them.
did you find him? How did you get
Well,
a hold of his name and his whereabouts?
it's an interesting story. What happened is I just happened to meet a woman who I knew and I hadn't seen since I was a kid. I must have been maybe 11, 12 years old, and she was even younger than that at the time.
Oh,
And we started talking. I don't know how she recognized me, but somehow she did. And we started talking, and she was an artist, and got. She said to me, when she found out that I was interested in exercise, I was very trying to build up my body and doing calisthenics and all kinds of and running and etc. Some weightlifting, and she said, if you're interested in that, you really should go to the school where I'm learning calligraphy, and that was Cheng Man-ch'ing's school. And she said, what they're doing will be very good for you because you're very stiff and you're very nervous, and I was both of those, and the high strung. I was very high strung in those days.
how old were you at that time, roughly?
And
Roughly.
around 33, something like that.
Okay. So you showed up, and what was your first impression,
Well, anyway, this is what happened. That I went down there,
right?
and I was looking for 211 Canal Street, which was the address of the first school. The school at that time, it was the Tai Chi Chuan Association,
Right.
and the I was looking for 211, and a lot of those buildings didn't have house numbers. They didn't have numbers on. They still don't. I don't. Wherever you go, you don't see any numbers on houses. I don't know how anybody gets their mail.
Understood.
But anyway, a woman. I'm looking up and looking around, and a woman comes over to me and says, "You're looking for the Tai Chi school, right?" And I said, I was very surprised because it's a very busy street, and I,
Yeah.
used to do a lot of shopping on that area of Canal Street, all the stores, etc. And she said, it's over there, and she showed me where it was, and I went up. That was actually Natasha Gorky, who I think was the daughter of Maxim Gorky, the famous artist, or what was it, Maxim Gorky, or she was the daughter of a famous artist.
Okay.
And maybe Maxim Gorky was a writer, but she, I got to know her afterwards. But at the time, I had no idea who she was. This woman with a British accent came over. And so I went up, and there was a sign that said, remove street footwear before entering, and I did, and I went in. And I saw these people doing this weird stuff. And I said to myself, I don't see that there's much value in this. Maybe if they had a 10-pound weight in each hand and they were doing it twice as fast, really, really doing. And there was this heavy guy. In those days, very few people were overweight, but this guy was pretty overweight. It turned out it was Stanley Israel, who was a senior student. I didn't know anything about him. And I said, "What kind of place is this for health when people are this overweight?" And I was really turned off. And then the class ended that I was watching. I wasn't part of it. I was just sitting there watching. And a new class started, and it was swords. And Stanley grabbed a sword, and he was floating around and just spinning around and doing movements. I said, my God, if anybody that heavy can move that well, maybe there's something to this. So I figured I'll sign up, and I found out it was $51 for 3 months.
Was it expensive, or was it okay, or was it
Well,
what?
for me, it was very expensive. I had no money in those days.
Okay.
I'd go into a supermarket, and I'd have to count my change to know what I was going to buy. It was
So it was an overweight guy, according to your standards at that time, who was doing the sword
yes,
that got you in.
yeah,
It's so funny how just a little thing can change your mind, your emotion, your just perception. And now, just get the years for me. When did you start? What year was it? And when did you end? Meaning, I think it's the professor returning to Taiwan. So what were those years?
it was from April 1970 to something like May 1975, April and May 1975, maybe a little or less than that. So it's 5 years with Cheng Man-ch'ing. But he would go to Taiwan half the year and stay here half the year.
Wow, that was a commute.
Yeah. Well, he didn't go every day. It was
Yeah, I know. I see. So it's only half a year. So what were the classes like? Of course, when he was there, you went for 3 classes a week, but when he was gone, who was doing the teaching?
Well, most of the time it was the senior students doing the teaching, and then with the next echelon of students helping out and correcting and giving you little things to do or saying things to you. But it was mainly Maggie or Lou. You never knew who was going to lead the class, or sometimes it was Herman Quaz.
Okay.
Sometimes it was who else? Tam.
Okay.
Lou Klein. Did I mention Lou Kleinsmith? Ed Young. It was those people who were took turns leading the class, but you never knew who was going to be there, and sometimes it was a second echelon student, or maybe one who's been there a few years.
Yeah. One thing I've observed, either in books that his students wrote and published, was that the professor Cheng Man-ch'ing always had a smile, a very genial smile, and kind-looking, and actually naturally humble. He doesn't look like one of those stern, kind of almost tyrannical, dictatorial, kind of patriarchal, daddy type, macho type. Was he ever angry at anybody when he was there that you observed?
Never.
Was he really always wearing that smile?
Well, he wasn't always wearing a smile, but he was always very relaxed and very. There was a serenity about him all the time, and he laughed a lot. He did laugh a lot. he would say something and then laugh, or somebody would say something, ask a question, and he would always often laugh at the question. It wasn't derisive laughter. It was
Right.
enjoy. He enjoyed laughing. He loved to laugh.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
What do you think was his motivation in coming to America to teach Tai Chi? Was it just teaching Tai Chi for the sake of? Oh, I mean, I'm using Tai Chi because that's the most oftenly used, most frequently used way instead of Tai Chi or Tai Chi Chuan, in real Chinese. But Tai Chi is fine. I'll just accept it as it is. So, was he a pioneer in teaching Tai Chi, or was he really meant to do other things? Maybe spreading Chinese culture, talking about Confucianism, talking about Taoism. I'll let you talk.
Well, it's hard for me to know. What was said was that he really did not come here to teach Tai Chi.
He now came, you are talking.
He did not. That was not in his mind at all.
Really?
That's what I heard. I don't know what was really there, but that's what was said. That he came, and there were a bunch of what were the original students who were studying Tai Chi with what was his name? Da Lu, who I don't know if he was a student of Cheng Man-ch'ing, but he certainly knew Cheng Man-ch'ing. Da Lu was in New York City and teaching Tai Chi.
You have to accept my ignorance. I have no idea who is this Da Lu, a Chinese man or?
Yeah, he was Chinese, and he was an expert, I'm told, on numerology, Chinese numerology and I Ching.
Very interesting. Oh, and, wow.
Yeah, he wrote a book, according to one of my students who was very interested in numerology. He said that he wrote one of the best books on Chinese numerology. He's one of the foremost experts on it, and it's out of print. It's out of print.
Okay. So are you saying that Da Lu, how do you spell the name or roughly? I don't want you to go through
his book,
any trouble.
Actually, last night I was reading his book.
Can you just show it to the screen?
Well, this is the book that I have.
Taoist Health Exercise Book. Can you read it? Let me see his name. It looks like Zhou and Lai, by Da Liu, Liu Da.
Now,
maybe it's Liu Da.
Yeah,
okay,
now
I got
somewhere in here is his Chinese name, but I don't know. I could send that to you.
As I tell you, for Chinese people, and I am one, I grew up Chinese. Without seeing the Chinese characters of a Chinese person, I don't consider I know his or her name at all.
I thought I saw it in Chinese, but maybe it was.
That's okay, Robert. I'm more interested in okay, so are you saying that Da Liu had some hand, so to speak, in getting the professor to come and teach Tai Chi?
Well, it was inadvertent on his part. He invited him to teach a class of his classes, and when the students saw Cheng Man-ch'ing, they all wanted to study with him instead of Da Lu. So
really, why do you say that? Are you just?
Well, that's what the story is. I don't know what. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But this was the story.
You mean so it was kind of serendipity that
and then they started studying with Professor Cheng, and I think you see a lot of this is conjecture that when he saw how interested they were, and also they had all backgrounds in martial arts, Aikido, Judo, Karate, that they called their friends in who had experience in martial arts. When he saw how interested they were and how receptive they were, I think he continued teaching.
So it was mutual attraction. The students wanted to learn and the teacher wanted to teach. There was no coercion. There was nothing artificial, affected or contrived.
I think it was natural. And then what happened is more and more people started to come in. And when my theory is when he saw that, he remembered that Yang Luchan, who
Uh-huh.
was the first Yang who learned Tai Chi,
Mhm.
told his grandson Yang Cheng Fu
Right.
learned that his desire was to spread Tai Chi throughout China because people
I can see
were
that.
not
That's natural.
healthy in
Yeah.
China,
Right. Right.
and he felt that was very important that they learn Tai Chi for health.
Mhm.
And Yang Cheng Fu felt the same way, and he as a child, supposedly he didn't want to do Tai Chi, he wanted to do hardstyle, but he followed his grandfather's wishes to do Tai Chi, and did everything he could. He couldn't. He didn't know how to read or write Chinese, but he had his students. Had a number of students who did, and got them to write about it. One of them was Cheng
You mean
Man-ch'ing.
Yang Chengfu was no disrespect. Yang Chengfu was not schooled.
No,
He wasn't illiterate.
no.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of people weren't in those days. Many
Okay. Yeah.
people weren't.
Okay.
And so he hoped that his students who were able to read and write would help to spread Tai Chi as much as possible.
But Cheng Man-ch'ing, the professor, could. He could, because I know that
Oh.
he wrote, and then he was educated.
Oh, highly so. And he
Yeah.
knew the old Chinese
Yeah.
too. He
Yeah.
could read all the classics, etc., in the original Chinese. Yeah.
So tell us what it was like. How many students who did most of the teaching, and what was a class like, and how often did you go, and what was happening in class? Anything
Yeah.
you can remember, first hand.
Yeah.
This is first hand. Go into your memory palace and dig up all the impressions and perceptions.
I'll reach in a minute, but I want to finish up my theory that once Professor Cheng saw how many people were extremely interested in Tai Chi and were good at it and were devoted to it, totally devoted. I mean, these people were just so devoted to Tai Chi. All of us were. When he saw that, I think he felt that this will spread Tai Chi. And he even said once, he said, America is the place where Tai Chi will flourish. That
Okay.
China, he didn't feel that it was going to flourish in China anymore.
Okay.
And if you look and you watch people in China doing Tai Chi, these people who win the contests, they'll be doing Tai Chi and suddenly they'll do a split on the floor, or they'll stand and they'll lift one foot all the way over their head.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
and that's just wushu. That's just where they'll
wushu,
do
yeah.
acrobatics.
That's right.
while they're
Sure,
doing Tai Chi.
sure.
So it's not the same. It's not not following the principles. It's something that, I mean, they're very skilled. There's no question about that. But it's not the same as what Cheng Man-ch'ing had learned and was teaching.
So tell me
He
the
felt
day
that this
to
would
day.
be the future of Tai Chi, but it
Right,
went
right.
all over the world. It's all
Right.
over the world. There may be only a few countries in the world. Even in Africa, I get hits on my website from Africa, from all places, almost all places in Europe. I don't get anything from North Korea, but South Korea, all over, Australia, everywhere.
So tell us about the classes. What were they like?
He would come in once in a while when I was a beginner, he would come in once in a while, and as soon as he'd enter the room, there was an office and he would come in from the office, and when he'd enter the room there was quiet and everyone was immediately glued to him. And I didn't understand why or who he was or anything. I just knew this old man was coming in, and that was it. And okay. And then he would do some movements and talk always through an interpreter. He didn't speak English, and at first I thought he was pretending not to speak English, and he really could, but he couldn't. He really didn't know English, maybe a couple of words. And then he would say rest and walk out. And I remember the first time when we were doing the first movement, before he came in and he did the first movement. And I was amazed because he had stepped out with his left foot and started shifting to his, the first preparation move.
Yes.
And he was I didn't see him step. I said, how did he do that? His foot is out there, and I didn't even see. I was looking at him, and I didn't even see how he could have stepped. And I realized there's something to this that's really going to be very valuable to learn. And
You have to forgive me. I don't understand what you mean by when he starts lifting his left foot, you somehow can envision what he is doing. What does that mean? What can you put it in
He did it
another
so
way?
naturally and so quietly and with so little action
Oh,
to take that step
oh,
that I didn't even know he had stepped until I saw him shift his weight.
you mean you're talking about the ward off?
No, the preparation move, the very
Or
first
just
move.
even the preparation? Okay,
Yeah,
wow, really?
yeah. And
Okay.
so that was a big lesson to me. And also I realized that early on, I realized that Taiji was going to solve a problem that I had, which was that I was very uncoordinated, extremely so. And I'd never did sports. Very good with my hands. I'm playing the keyboard, building model planes, etc. But I was out of my body, and I realized this is what I need. So I was very, very intent on this. After the first 2 weeks, I was hooked on it completely, and have been ever since. And
Yeah, how many years now? How many years? How many decades?
Well, in April will be 53 years.
And you have written
Goes
quite a number of
fast.
books.
It goes fast.
Yes, you have written several major books, the Tai Chi book,
Yeah.
and also the Tai Chi concepts and experiments. I think it was published, 2021?
Yeah.
And lots of videos and other essays
Yeah.
on
Well,
your
4
website.
videos. But Taiji Dynamics
yeah,
was
right.
another one,
That
and
one too.
Taiji Walking was another one.
Right.
Um,
But your website, chuckrowtaichi.com, is itself, I think, a textbook. It's
it's a
filled
lot of
with
stuff on there. Yeah.
including sayings and fortune cookies. I was reading it earlier this morning, another quotation by Henry Ford and Albert Einstein. I was it's really a textbook. But back to the professor, what other things were special about the professor? Was there a mystique, a charm, a certain panache, or a certain just savoir-faire that was kind of semi-mysterious? I'm not trying to be critical
Well,
about
I think the reaction would be if a religious person were to see Jesus coming into the room.
Oh no, that good.
Well, that was the way they acted. It was
Really?
such totally respectful. Nobody was disrespectful to him. There was such revere for him, love for him, love.
And
for
I
him.
think as of today, a lot of people worship him. I mean, worship in the strictest sense of the word, not just
I think
not
so.
just
Yes.
saying it frivolously.
Yes.
And so, did anyone challenge him? Well, I mean, he was still a martial
I don't
artist.
think anybody really challenged him.
Okay.
The only thing was that there was one student who said, I've had a number of different martial arts teachers, and they all let me attack them,
Oh, yeah.
and I want to know what you
Good
would
idea.
do. Yeah. So Cheng Man-ch'ing said, hit me as hard as you can,
Yeah.
and he showed him where to hit,
Yeah,
and
no.
stood there, and this student hit him so hard.
It's just
And I had
terrible.
brought my high school class
Yeah,
of students
yeah,
that day, and
yeah.
they saw that, and one girl was holding. I said, "Don't do that. You have to see this. This is
Right,
not
right.
what happens in every
Yeah, I know.
class." And then Cheng Man-ch'ing said, "Hit me again." This guy, he called.
No,
It was really hard. So anyway, he showed that he could take a punch for sure.
Yeah. I mean, in
But
all
nobody
classes,
really challenged.
yeah.
Nobody
You-
ever challenged
yeah.
him that I
You-
know.
you-
Maybe
yeah,
some
you-
people came in when I wasn't there to do that, and
Right. Yeah.
who knows what happened.
Yeah. I mean, you've taught in your career, and I have been a teacher. There will always be some students who are kind of unruly, and
Yes.
there's nothing we can do about it.
Always.
Now, why did the professor returned to Taiwan. I know that he commuted kind of, he lived half a year in New York and half a year in Taiwan. And why? I think you told me a few months ago or a couple of years ago that he actually at one point kind of hinted at the fact that he just might be leaving for good. Because when I saw that documentary, a nice documentary called Tai Chi's Journey to the West, made by some of his students and people who revere him as a nice documentary, that I remember one short episode, a scene in the documentary of a young lady, they were much younger at that time, saying that the professor wrote a Chinese, because he was a Chinese medicinal herbalist, and he volunteered to write it's not a recipe, it's a medical prescription, made up of 25, 30 Chinese herbs. And she was saying in the documentary, I don't know why he wanted to do that. It sounds like it's a goodbye prescription. Did you feel that way?
Well, he said some things. One was that he said, well, when Buddha was my age, he only had 1 year to live. And then another time he brought all of the students together and said to them about Ed Young, Tam, Mort Raphael was another one of the six, Lou Kleinsmith and Maggie and who else? Did I mention six? I don't know. That if I'm not here, these six are equivalent to me.
Okay.
And Stanley was the other, Stanley Israel. These six are equivalent to me.
Oh.
Now there were other people who were there, who were not even there, who claimed that they were the ones who got the real teaching and that they were the true disciple.
Okay.
So, and I mentioned it to another student. He said who was helping teach at that school, and I said, "How can you do that? The teacher says he's the real disciple, and he's not." He said, "Doesn't matter." He said, the students are happy. But anyway, there some people said that at least one said that he was the real disciple, and there's some question about that.
Yeah. Now, do you think he succeeded in expanding Tai Chi, or in fact he was even the pioneer of teaching Tai Chi Quan?
Well, he was teaching teachers. He was. Everyone in the school had a chance to teach at a certain point, and were encouraged to teach. And what happened with me is, after about 3 years, I got a job at a high school, an alternative high school, and they asked me, "What can you teach besides science?" And I said, "Well, I do Tai Chi. I could teach that." And they said, "Good," and I did. And I said I would teach it, and I ended up teaching it. But when I came back to the school after being interviewed and getting the job, I said, I'm going to be teaching to one of the senior students. I'm going to be teaching Tai Chi in the fall. And the senior students said, you can't do that. And they took me to Cheng Man-ch'ing, and in his office, and the senior students were there, and the interpreters were there. And the interpreter said to Cheng Man-ch'ing, "This student says he's going to be teaching Tai Chi in the fall." And there was some discussion back and forth in Chinese. And the upshot, and I thought I was going to be kicked out of the school. I had done something terrible. I had no idea that I needed permission to do this. And Cheng Man-ch'ing said, "Okay, Tam has a class at the Y in Manhattan, and Robert will come in and teach his class, and he will help Robert to become a good teacher." And so I was teaching for Tam Gibbs in his class in Manhattan at the YMCA, and so I was being prepped to be able to teach. And Cam didn't like it. He didn't like the idea that I was taking over his class. But, he would say things like, I'd be teaching and he'd say to me, "That is wrong." And he'd tell the students, "Don't listen to him. He doesn't know anything." So, but I was just happy that I was given that.
Right.
And then
So
and then I did teach, and then they gave me other classes, and they helped me along to be successful.
but the professor was not the first in America. I am
No.
sure that before him there were
Oh,
a lot of
yes.
Tai Chi Chuan teachers.
There was Sophia Delza, who
Oh,
was a dancer who had studied Tai Wu style, I think it was.
oh,
And there
Worcester.
was Edward Moselle,
Okay,
and
okay,
both of those had written books. And then there was Kuo
ah,
Lin Ying,
okay,
I don't remember his name,
yeah.
on the West Coast, the one that Lawrence Galanti had studied with. And so they were there, but they weren't spreading it the way Cheng Man-ch'ing, and of course there was Dalu, but they weren't generating the expansion of Tai Chi the way Cheng Man-ch'ing was. I think he's responsible for its popularity, mainly responsible.
If you were to guess the number of people uh, who actually had learned from him directly, would you say 100, 200? During what, a 10-year period? I think he came to America in 1965. He left maybe about 1975. I'm not sure. I think it's about 10 years. I mean, back and forth from Taiwan and the US. How many people did he actually touch, so to speak?
Well, you're talking about teachers
Yeah,
or yeah.
everybody, any student who paid $51 a week.
Oh, maybe 1,000 students. I don't know,
That
hundreds,
many?
hundreds. Well,
That many?
yeah. Oh, yeah. There were a lot of different students coming and going. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
And
I don't
what,
know.
what were the
Maybe
students like?
on the order of 100 or maybe more, I'd say.
What were the students like? I again in the documentary, Tai Chi's Journey to the West. I remember a commenter, a person who was making comments, said that the students were a motley crowd. That it ranged from, I can even quote him, blue blood to hippies. So tell me, what did you see? Who were these people? Who were your classmates? What were they like? Were they only interested in martial art, or were some of them actually interested in health and well-being?
A lot of them were martial artists, and we didn't know until it emerged slowly who was and who wasn't. There were
Mhm.
people who were very high level.
Wow.
Now, Herman Kors was a top karate and judo guy.
Uh-huh.
I mean, really top, world class.
Wow.
And Stanley Israel had a school with Herman Kors.
Mhm.
And, there were number of people there. Galanti was another one. He had studied all types of Shaolin styles and
Wow.
Tai Chi.
Uh-huh.
And the Antonucci, what was his first name? I can't remember.
It's
Lenny
all right.
Antonucci was
Yeah.
fifth degree black belt in karate.
Okay.
And
Okay.
there were people there, and there people came in who you would never know unless you were told this guy runs a karate school, or this guy is famous. There were people there all the time.
Now,
But most of us were just there for learning something interesting. There were people who were artists. There were people who were musicians. There were people who were actors. There were people who were entrepreneurs, had stores, had businesses, high-level professionals, teachers, highly trained people, all manner of people, from the hippies with long hair and torn pants and bare feet to people coming in with suits or religious garb or whatever.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The any cops, any people who were in the police force?
Well, Stanley Israel was
Oh,
a
okay,
prison
yeah.
guard. He was the
Oh,
head. He was the head of the Prison Workers Union,
I did not know
president of
that.
the Prison Workers Union
Oh,
at
wow,
Rikers Island.
that's that's a big deal.
Yeah,
Uh,
and he would be called in when they needed somebody who could handle some of these prisoners,
I see. Now, when he
without
was
having
in,
to shoot them or something. You don't want to have to do
I
that.
don't know. So now, of course, he taught, the professor taught a Yang style or Yang style. Yang is the proper
Young.
way to say it, the Yang style. Then did you see other people from the Chen style, the Wu style, the Sun style, and all these styles coming, or did he invite any other Tai Chi masters? Yes or no?
Well, see, again, coming back to the way the classes were taught, it was mostly taught by the senior students,
Okay,
except in the last year. Cheng Man-ch'ing was very loved push hands. He would spend a lot of time doing push hands with people,
I
and was
see.
very good at it, and very giving up all kinds of corrections. And somebody would be locked, and he'd just show them how to move to get out of it. But most of the time, it was being taught by the senior students, except the last year, when Cheng Man-ch'ing was available for all these different classes he taught: sword correction, form correction, push hands, a course in Confucianism. He taught meditation. He taught all these things in the last year. So that was
What
another
was the
sign
last
that
year? What was the last year? What year?
well, 1975, I guess, or 1974, 75. So that was just before he passed. So that's another piece of evidence that he may have felt that was going to happen. But he's extremely generous. Everyone got corrected by him. He was in class a lot. He would be there a lot.
Strange question. I know that people wanted to learn Tai Chi Chuan from him, and whatever the skills and the art. Did anyone actually get interested in learning Chinese so he or she could just speak with him?
Well,
Huh?
let me come back to the other question that you had asked about other people of other styles coming in. There were people who learned other styles, but for example, Lawrence Galanti, who never showed his style. His was the Kwangping style,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but nobody would have known that. And there was one student who left and was away maybe for a year and came back and started to show his movements, which were beautiful. I said to myself, "Wow, this is amazing stuff." And then one of the senior students, they all studied Japanese styles, so there was this strictness that they felt, which I don't think was necessarily representative of the way Cheng Man-ch'ing would have viewed it.
Okay.
And they made him stop and said, "No, you can't show that. You can't show it." And I remember I brought in a movie of Li Ying-arng, and a projector. I hauled this projector in, a 8 millimeter projector and movie, and I wanted to show it, and they said, "No, you can't show that."
I see. Okay.
And there was a secret, almost like everything else was wrong. Ours was the only thing that was right, and all the other things you can't look at. It'll make you sick if you see that or do that.
Yeah. Seems like it's not just the Yang style or any style. It seems like Tai Chi Chuan is very lineage based. It's almost like who's your teacher, mean like who's your daddy, and so it's so important to know whose daddy is whom, that kind of whose daddy is who. I think grammatically, and why it kind of struck me as a tad tribal, patriarchal,
Yeah,
hierarchical,
it
and
is.
perhaps a little kind of strong man, not the big muscle man, strong man, but kind of it's kind of patriarchal. It's very traditional. It just hits me that way all the time. Wonder why? Is it
Well,
because martial art is so competitive that
I, well, it's like somebody says, it's like somebody saying, your father doesn't know what he's talking about.
yeah,
I think your father, and the other guy says, and I can beat up your father. My father can beat up your father. And it's that feeling. No, my father can beat up your father.
we
And,
never leave
and
our
if the
junior
two
high.
fathers met, they would just talk to each other and shake hands and,
Yeah, I
and
know.
pat each other on the back and say, "Wow, it was so interesting talking to you." You know, but that's the way it is, and some of it comes from, I think. I think the Japanese martial arts are much more that way.
Mm.
So, for example, the senior students, I was studying also at the same time with William Chen because the word was you can learn better from him because he speaks English. And
Yes.
it was true. And you could have a conversation with him.
Right, right.
And whereas with Cheng Man-ch'ing you couldn't. And the, 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 the senior students told me, don't ever tell Professor Cheng that you are studying with William Chen. And I remember
Oh no,
I used to drive
no.
William home. In those days, he was William. Now he's Grandmaster Chen.
Okay, sure.
And I drive him home, and he'd invite me up. And one time he showed me all these pictures of Cheng Man-ch'ing
Yeah,
with his
yeah.
arms around him.
Yeah,
He said
right.
he came to my wedding, and we're friends. He doesn't hate me. And, you know, and it didn't stop me from studying with Cheng Man-ch'ing or continuing to teach his style.
Now, you still have not answered my question. Why
No,
was it?
but the thing is, I think that came more from the Japanese style, from the American students having studied the Japanese styles.
Yeah.
Because one of my high school students, when I was teaching at Fieldston, this was many years ago, said, it was like a second or third degree in karate with Masayama, a very high level guy. And I said to him, you know, your school is only a block away from my Tai Chi school. Why don't you come over and watch a class? He said, I could never do that. I'd be kicked out of the school if anybody saw me do that.
It's almost like a betrayal, meaning
Yeah,
if
but
you
I think that comes from the Japanese styles more than the Chinese. I don't know. It's just a guess.
I'm still interested in why no one single student wanted to learn Chinese so that he or she could just communicate directly with.
Well, I don't know. Some of them may have done that, but
Oh.
the other thing is, well, Chinese is not. That's a big thing to do when you maybe have a family and have a job and all those things. But it can be done. Of course, people do it.
Didn't he have Chinese speaking students? Meaning one of your classmates was.
There were Chinese speaking students. Grace Chi was one of them, and there were a few others. Kwang.
So could they
Frank Kwang.
volunteer to help out with the translation, Robert?
Well, there were two translators, Tam Gibbs and Ed Young,
Okay.
and they would alternate between them and sometimes discuss and try to refine what they was, their translation.
Right.
But there were some Chinese people in the class who said, no, they're not translating it correctly. They spoke English fluently and Chinese, and they said, no, they're not translating correctly.
So what happened?
Well, I think for the most part they did, but maybe they missed some things. But there were Chinese people in the class but they weren't called on to translate, or they didn't volunteer.
So did Professor Cheng encourage people to ask questions, or it was a no-no?
No, it wasn't a no-no. It was any question that was asked was given an answer.
Okay.
But a lot of the times, if a question was asked, it was a one-word answer.
Oh.
Relax was the answer. Every question I ever asked, the answer was relax. And then I asked the question about, in a 100% stance, is there any I spent a lot of time formulating the question: is there any pressure on the floor, or is your foot just resting on the floor? Is there no pressure? And I thought that was a good question, because some people would say your foot is draped on the floor, meaning it's just dead.
Oh,
But so I asked the question, and the answer came back: empty means empty. And
it's
I
hard.
said, I was a very outspoken person. I still am,
Mhm.
maybe less so. I, if you think I'm outspoken now, you can imagine what I was like then.
I know, I know.
So I said, that doesn't answer the question. And so they asked it again, asked Professor again. And the answer came back: it's the same as if it were off the floor. Which was,
It is the same. Say it again. It is the same.
when you're in 100% stance with one foot touching, with the forward foot touching the floor, like in White Crane,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
it's the same as if your foot were not even touching the floor.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
that was the answer I wanted. I wanted to know that.
Yeah.
And but so I don't know whether it was the translation one way or the next, to Professor or from him back, or it may have been that Professor Cheng wasn't sure if the question was being translated to him from English to Chinese correctly, and then wasn't sure if it would be translated back, and didn't want to make a mistake, didn't want to transmit anything wrong. So that's a suspicion I had, and but the translators were not always necessarily understanding what Cheng Man-ch'ing was saying, because they may not have been on the level,
Mhm.
on a high enough level to understand, but they were doing the best they could.
But in your opinion, the professor did do a lot of good, did have a great impact on spreading
Oh,
the
absolutely.
knowledge or an interest in Tai Chi in America. He did. He did. He did.
Yeah. So, and the question that I ask is, why did so many of them, after Professor passed, why did so many of them continue to only study with those who of Professor Cheng's lineage? Why didn't they also, which they could have continued to do, but not, but why didn't they go to other people of different styles and different, who never even met Professor?
I think
I
that
did.
yeah, I know you do. You do. You like to explore. Yes, yes. Now, to kind of to just really come to a quick summary, can you name just 3 memories, or say 3 things that make you, oh, you dream about the professor from time to time, which means that whatever you did when you were learning from him, his impact on you got into your subconsciousness. It's real. Otherwise, you would not have been dreaming of him. Because I know that you like him very much, you respect him very much, you almost revere him, but you don't necessarily, consider him your grandfather, something like that.
No.
You didn't take it that personally, but obviously he was in your psyche. So name 3 things that you remember the professor the most. What were those 3
You mean the
personal
dreams I've had
memories?
about him?
Yeah, either dream or
The dreams I had were, I feel, him really coming to me, either when he was alive or now that he's passed. I think I really feel that he has, that it's not something that percolated up from my subconscious, because there's evidence that it didn't,
Okay.
but that it came from him.
Okay.
The first dream I had, or that I can remember, was I was doing, in my sleep, which I often did, doing Tai Chi.
No.
And on the first move, the preparation move, and I stepped out with my left foot,
Oh.
and stepped out and started to put weight on it,
Uh-huh.
Professor said to me, I want to give you a correction. When you stepped out and put the weight on, your foot was tense.
Oh.
It was tense. You have to release all of the tension in your foot. And so as soon as I woke up, I tried doing that move, and I realized he was right. He was right. And another dream that I had after this that may have been while I was still studying with him. Another dream that I had. Oh, and I had dreams where he was speaking to me in English, and but with a very strong Brooklyn accent.
Yeah.
Very strong Brooklyn accent. And that made me start to think maybe he does speak English, but I was
You're
wrong.
going cuckoo. Yes.
But in the dream, it did. And then another one, I dreamt, he came to me and he said, this is after he had passed, he came to me in the dream and said, you need to eat, what is a certain vegetable, I can't remember now the name. It's very sour vegetable.
Prune.
No, it's a very sour leafy vegetable.
Leafy, sour, and leafy.
Yeah.
Okay. Not some kind of cabbage. Okay, let it go.
Yeah,
Let it go.
but
Let
anyway,
it go.
I had never seen that vegetable ever in my life. Anywhere.
Swan Cai, yeah, pickled vegetable.
No, not pickled. It was fresh vegetable, but it's very sour.
Really?
It's very sour.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
And that day was the same day as the farmers market, which is in my town. So, which I didn't go to very much, but this day I decided to go to the farmers market, and there sorrel. It was sorrel, and I'd never seen sorrel before in my life, and it was there, and I bought some, and I said to myself, I forgot. I should have thought to ask him, should I eat it raw or cooked?
Well.
So, and then what the most recent dream was, he came to me and he said, when you do downward single whip, you go down and you turn out the left foot at 45 degrees. And he said, that's wrong. You just keep it straight out. Don't go out 45 degrees. In other words, keep it in a cardinal direction. And I said to myself when I woke up, I said, that doesn't make any sense, because first of all, we were taught by the senior students to turn that foot out, angle that foot out. And I've been doing that, up until then, all my Tai Chi life. And then the other is, how do you have stability when you come up into Golden Cock or step up to the 7 stars?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I decided I would research this, and I went to videos of his students in China that he taught in China, and I watched, and I looked at that move, and there was one woman, and she wanted to move that foot out, but she didn't do it. I could see she felt she needed to, but she didn't do it, and then none of them did. So what do I make of that dream? I've thought about that a lot, and this is sort of what I've come up with. First of all, how do I know that wasn't me, myself, who was coming up with this? Well,
right.
That's pretty far-fetched, that I would be shown something that I would never have guessed to think of, and never was taught, never even saw. That seemed to be wrong. So that's evidence that it didn't come from me. And then the question is, if it was Professor, why did he choose to pick that one thing, which is not a big error? It's not like I'm teaching something that's going to make people sick, or doing something that's going to make me sick. It's a very small, very fine point. And I've changed a lot of the movements, I feel, for more according to the principles than I was taught.
Yeah.
in ways that he could have said, no, that don't do it the way I taught it, that. Don't do it the way you're doing it. But he didn't say that. So,
Well,
one, it was a way of picking something that would startle me or prove to me or give me evidence that it was really he who was correcting me and not my imagination doing it. And two, it was a way of saying, I like what you're doing and teaching. I feel you're doing a good job because this is the only thing I can find wrong.
so Robert,
I have that feeling that he
Okay.
likes what I'm doing. He likes what I'm doing.
what my take is, this is the conclusion. My take is you are still learning. You are still willing to learn. And
Every
obviously
day.
you feel that he's still willing to teach. I think that's a great, great feeling. I really think. And I thank you, Robert. We can do this again, but I think that maybe we should just, call this an end. And it's been fun. It's been fun going into your memory palace, digging up the feelings, the emotions, not just the art, but just the fact that he was able to convey something deeply Chinese to something that was really quite alien. Don't you think? Tai Chi was really quite an alien art
Was it
form.
ever? Yes. With my scientific background,
Yeah.
I doubted everything. Well, I still
Yeah.
do.
So he did something that is that was truly cross-cultural, truly.
And it led me to so many other things,
Right.
meditation, healing,
Right.
other arts that I would never have, who knows, maybe never have even thought of.
Yeah.
And it's helped my health. I'm 86 and I'm still going.
And continue to have dreams with the professor. Yeah. Thank
Not
you.
every night,
You,
though.
Robert. Yeah. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.